Cũng trong chương trình thảo luận về đề tài Stop the Hate, sau phần trình bày của các em học sinh, chúng tôi tiếp tục thảo luận về vấn đề này với các thầy cô trường trung học Westminster và một ứng viên tiến sĩ của Đại học UCLA. Từ góc độ của người giáo viên, các thầy cô thảo luận nhiều hơn về những gì nên thay đổi, nên có trong hệ thống giáo dục và quan điểm của họ về căm ghét là gì.
Chào mừng quý thầy cô đã đến với buổi interview ngày hôm nay. Em xin cảm ơn các thầy cô đã dành thời gian để đến hôm nay. Và để bắt đầu thì vào cái episode tuần trước, last week, we have an interview with the students and we are able to hear from the student point of view. But for today's episode, I'm inviting you guys to express your point of view about Stop Asian Hate. So I will start off by inviting all the teachers to watch a 14 seconds videos.
We need to talk about anti-Asian hate.
A wave of violence against elderly Asian Americans.
Violent attacks against Asian Americans.
More than 2,800 reports since the pandemic began.
Man attacks the couple.
Elderly woman is chased by a bully.
Slapped her and lit her clothes on fire.
8 people are dead after shootings.
I never see him again.
Em tên là An Nguyễn và em sẽ là người hỏi những câu hỏi trong buổi phỏng vấn ngày hôm nay. Thì sau khi mà xem cái video đó thì các thầy cô cảm thấy như thế nào ạ? After watching the video, what's your emotions, feelings or ideas that going through your head? I'm gonna start with Miss Dancing.
Theo cô thì cô thấy dù cho cái dân tộc Á Đông của mình đã ở nước Mỹ rất nhiều lâu rồi, không những người Việt Nam không mà có thể nói người Tàu từ thế hệ năm 1920 khi họ tới Cali tìm vàng này nọ đồ, mình vẫn thấy là mình chưa có được chấp nhận vô trong cái nước Mỹ này. Có thể là tiểu bang Cali chấp nhận nhiều hơn tại vì mình có nhiều Á Đông hơn, nhưng mà tại vì cô cũng có cơ hội đi nhiều chỗ, nhiều tiểu bang khác và nhiều nước ngoài quốc á, cô thấy người ta chấp nhận một số dân tộc của khác nước của họ nhiều hơn.
Em cảm ơn cô, em rất là đồng ý với cái quan điểm của cô. Tiếp theo em xin mời cô Đồng.
Thì sau khi cô coi cái đoạn clip đó, cô cảm giác là thật sự là không có ngạc nhiên mấy. Tại vì sau khi sống lớn lên ở đây, sinh ra lớn lên ở đây và học thêm về lịch sử của nước Mỹ, đa văn hóa nước Mỹ, thì hiểu rằng là ở quốc gia này cũng có cái làn sóng kỳ thị mỗi coi như mấy chục năm. Và thật sự không phải là mỗi mấy chục năm nhưng hàng ngày có nhiều dân tộc khắp nước Mỹ trải qua những vấn đề kỳ thị nữa. Và cái này mình chú tâm vào cộng đồng người châu Á trước đã, thì trong những năm vừa qua thì cái làn sóng kỳ thị đối với người châu Á nó có tăng so với những năm trước.
What are your thoughts, Mr.?
It makes my heart hurt. Just thinking about my parents. And just knowing, I guess, just like living here in Orange County, seeing a lot of Vietnamese individuals, and so I always felt safe. But seeing those incidents on the news in other places makes me very nervous and worried for my parents. So yeah.
Các thầy cô khác có những cái quan điểm, những cái bổ sung nào không ạ?
So two feelings, like một cái buồn, because like Michelle said, it's like I see my parents because those clips were like older Vietnamese, older Asians. But then it's also angry because, you know, why is this happening? So it's kind of like that mixed feeling of like I'm sad, but I'm also angry that this is happening.
Sorry, can I add in too that, like, I think going back to again the sad, like I felt sad watching all those clips, as well as the anger too, because it's like, why is it happening to mấy người mà lớn tuổi hơn mình? Like it should happen to me where I can at least defend myself, while those older people, it's like they're innocent. You know, they didn't do anything wrong to get that kind of treatment.
Với lại một phần nữa cô thấy như là cô Michelle với lại thầy Huy nói đó, tại cái thế hệ của phụ huynh mình một phần đó là tại họ không có cái ngôn ngữ để nếu mà khi mà họ bị ăn hiếp như vậy họ không có thể nói là giúp đỡ cho họ được, nên cái đó một phần mình cũng thấy buồn cho gia đình mà từ người lớn tuổi.
I'm out here in Oakland, Chinatown. I'm gonna walk around, try to protect our people by myself, and no, I ain't tripping. I just want people to stop attacking us for no reason, especially our elderly, kids or whatnot. We've been a target ever since the virus hit. I mean, before that we got, discriminated or whatnot, but it gotten worse. So I just can't sit back and not do anything. Every day walk around after work, that's what I'm gonna do from now on. I'm tired of seeing my people getting attacked. Try to help the Asian community, man. Plus, I'm Asian my damn self. I was driving with tears and everything. I just couldn't,
Thì cái video mà thầy cô vừa coi đó là một cái video về những cái người trong cộng đồng của mình. Họ đã làm những cái điều gì để có thể bảo vệ chính bản thân họ và bảo vệ cộng đồng của họ đang sinh sống ở trong đó. Thì the videos that you guys just watched basically is a summarize of what people do to protect their community and themselves. So our last questions for today. What Viet Americans can do to combat hate speech that is directed towards not just Asian but all groups. So what are your thoughts on it? Các thầy cô nghĩ như thế nào về cái việc những người Vietnamese American của mình cách bảo vệ cộng đồng của mình cũng như là cách họ bảo vệ những người khác trong cộng đồng của họ, không chỉ là bảo vệ cái cộng đồng người châu Á hoặc là người Việt Nam nói riêng nhưng mà bảo vệ những cái người trong các cộng đồng khác nữa. Thì các thầy cô có những suy nghĩ như thế nào về cái vấn đề này? Em xin mời cô Stansen.
Thì như trong cái video đó, mình có thể bảo vệ bằng một cách trước là mình phải cần một người họ có cái strength, họ có cái chú tâm, họ muốn giúp đỡ chống lại cái đó, nên chỉ cần một người, rồi từ một người đó mình có thể kéo thêm bạn bè hay gia đình thì nó sẽ thành một nhóm, rồi từ một nhóm thì nó sẽ tạo ra một cái cộng đồng để mình có thể chống được những cái sự ghét không những trong cộng đồng của mình nhưng mà ghét của những nhóm khác nữa.
Đối với cô là phải cố gắng có cái tinh thần mở mang trí tuệ, học hỏi, không phải là nghĩ là coi như đã biết tất cả rồi, phải không? Thì ví dụ cô nhìn ngay ở cộng đồng Việt Nam cũng có lúc có người Việt và người Á Châu kỳ thị đối với những nhóm khác chứ. Everyone's complicit. Nhưng cho vấn đề này thì cô nghĩ trước tiên là phải cố gắng học hỏi thêm về cộng đồng đa văn hóa và có cái tinh thần muốn cộng tác với họ nữa. Lý do tại sao trong lớp của cô thích khuyến khích học sinh ra cộng đồng làm community service để có thể học hỏi từ những nhóm khác. Tại vì not all the learning is not limited to the classroom. Trong lớp học của cô thì cô dạy tiếng Việt, phải không? Và cô dạy một phần nào về văn hóa Việt. Nhưng văn hóa Mỹ gốc Việt nó còn khác nữa. Và học sinh nên có cơ hội để tiếp xúc với những nhóm khác nhau trong cộng đồng để có thể học hỏi từ những người lớn khác trong cộng đồng. Và như vậy mới có cái khả năng để cộng tác và giúp cái cộng đồng ngay ở đây, Little Saigon, phải không? Orange County trở nên một nơi an toàn cho tất cả mọi người.
Yeah. Em cảm ơn cô. Emma, do you have any thoughts?
I think there's a great project for Vietnamese Americans across the U.S. And other racialized groups to find a sense of community with each other through way of empathy and understanding histories that not only would impact hate speech, but also other forms of violence.
I think, for us, against us, would be sharing, and sharing our culture, but also sharing in other people too, so that we go out there and share, like what Cô Dong said about, getting out in the community, doing community service. So I think just sharing of ourselves through our food, our culture, but also participating in others, and then sharing in theirs, so that we all can, in a way, be in this blend in which we all know each other and we all communicate and respect each other.
Can I add on? Yes, just to piggyback on Thầy Hui's too. It's like, yeah, like celebrating all the different cultures and traditions that all the other communities have as well too, because now it's like we make it known for everybody else. And as we are celebrating and enjoying all of these like foods, traditions, clothing, you know, people from the outside can see like now there's a bigger and stronger bond between these communities, right? And in the end, we'll stand together. And that video that you show, like I've seen that video before, and I know there's a little bit more to the video other than just him walking around by himself. He also encourages like his co-workers, his friends, and his families, and they join. And they're not just Asian American people; they're actually African American people and stuff too. So that's the kind of bond we need to have, and we need to continue building so that we not only just defend or help ourselves, but help all the other cultural groups as well too.
Makes me like think like what your question is, what can the Vietnamese American community do? I think it's like wishful thinking in terms of what the Vietnamese American community can do, because I think realistically we can't hope for what other people can do, but we can control ourselves, right? So it just makes me think of like, what can I do, because I have control over my actions. So like in being a part of the Vietnamese community in my role, and I hope that everybody feels the same like way in terms of, you know, you have your own individual determination to do what you can to contribute to the Vietnamese community so that we, I guess, can keep building, right? And so I just like, I guess in my role as like a teacher, I can continue to build relationship with my students, not just my Vietnamese, my Asian, but all of my students, to show them that regardless of whether I'm Vietnamese, Hispanic, Black, white, or whatever, it's like I'm still this caring person that cares for you, and I want the best for you. And I want these students that I come in contact and build these relationships with to go out into the world and have that positive experience with just another human that, you know, doesn't look like them, and they can take that positive experience and continue to spread. And that's kind of why I kind of don't want to go into admin, because I feel like I feel like that's my purpose, to have that one-on-one relationship with my students, where I feel like I have a bigger impact in changing their trajectory.
Thì cái câu hỏi tiếp theo đó, em xin mời các thầy cô có thể giới thiệu bản thân của mình và cũng như là cái vai trò của các thầy cô ở trong trường học, và các thầy cô cảm thấy như thế nào khi mình là một người Asian American. For the next questions, I would like to invite all of you to introduce yourself, your role in the school system, as well as what does it mean to be an Asian American to you. I'm gonna start off with Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Tran. I'm a PhD student at UCLA, and I study community health sciences. So I'm not an educator here in the school district, but I have undergraduate students, and I teach public health classes. I think with any kind of racial or racialized identity, being of that identity means that you are that because of your relationship to other identities. So we are Asian because we are neither white nor Black nor Hispanic. And those are categories that have been created to structure society. And for me, being Asian American is a way that people read me, and it's also a way that I read myself. It's a way that I read my family and their story, and the way that I read my community story. It's a lens through which, you know, people read me and I read society.
My name is Lawrence Nguyen, and I teach math here at Westminster High School. And for me to be Asian American, personally, I feel like I have to work harder than most other non-Asian, I guess, individuals, right? Because I grew up in Texas as a kid. My family was the only Vietnamese, let alone Asian family in the entire city. So, you know, growing up, they would think that I could do martial arts, and like a, you know, stereotype, discrimination. I felt that as a kid. So like everything that I did growing up, I had to kind of put in extra efforts to kind of prove to them that I'm capable and that I can, you know, I guess, prove to them wrong that I can be successful and do things well. So that's what it means to be Asian American to me.
Thank you so much. Next up, I would like to invite Mr. Pham.
Hi, my name is Hui Pham. I teach science and I work with students on the STEM program here at Westminster High School. For me, Asian American is kind of being interesting because it depends on where I am. Here, I was born and raised here. So for me, being Asian American, I get to feel special because I get to have better food than the rest of America. So that, I do. Whenever I go talk to my non-Asian friends, and one of the things I introduce is the food here. And I'm like, man, we have really good food, especially Vietnamese food. But, and I get to do that and feel special because in here, I live in Little Saigon in a way, an environment that's protected in a way, because a lot of Vietnamese are here, and even Hispanics, they understand and they respect our culture. But I do travel too. When I travel outside, it's kind of a weird thing when I'm Asian American. Sometimes I've traveled to places and I'm the only Asian, or my group of friends are the only Asian, and we walk in and everyone looks at us. So sometimes it kind of, from that lens, it's kind of like, I'm different now. I don't feel that until I actually leave this bubble of Southern California or California. So that's, for me, as Asian American, it's that dichotomy.
Cô là ლი틀Saigon. Cô là hướng dẫn viên cho học sinh có họ từ Y tới N ở trường trung học Westminster. Cô rất là hãnh diện là mình có một phần Á Đông trong cuộc đời của mình. Nên cô lúc nào cô cũng khuyến khích học sinh nên phải tự hào vì cái tên của mình và họ của mình. Dù cho là mình có thể sanh từ đây, ba mẹ mình cho mình một cái tên Mỹ, nhưng mà cái họ của mình vẫn là họ Á Đông. Nên vì như vậy cô thấy là cô hãnh diện vì phần đó. Cô muốn khuyến khích tất cả học sinh có gốc Á Đông, gốc Việt, khi mà giới thiệu mình nên dùng cái tên họ của người Việt của mình. Với lại cô thấy cũng đồng ý như thầy Huy nói đó, một cái mình lợi tức là tại vì nếu mà mình là Mỹ Á Đông thì mình được hưởng thấy hai cái phong tục. Đó, nên cô thấy vậy nên cô thấy hãnh diện mình là người Á Đông có gốc Việt.
Em cảm ơn cô. Em xin mời cô.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dang Pastor, and I teach AP Psychology and AVID here at Westminster High School. What does it mean to be Asian American? I often identify myself as Vietnamese American than Asian American, and it's how I guess, trace back where I came from. So I was born in Vietnam. And so when we moved here, obviously there's a lot of other Vietnamese Americans here in Orange County. And I think just like growing up, I wanted to blend in and fit in, just like this is what you do when you're little kids, I guess. But now that I'm older, it's like I don't want to blend in. Like I want to stand out. I think it's a beautiful thing that I'm different than others, and it is a little scary, you know, traveling to places where I'm like the only Vietnamese or the only like Asian, but it's something that I'm trying to like embrace more and just kind of like really empower myself that this is who I am, this is my identity, and I'm different, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Like different is a good thing, and so that's how I identify myself.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite cô Mai Khánh.
Yeah, cô là cô Mai Khánh, cô dạy tiếng Việt bên trường trung học Westminster. And what does it mean to be Vietnamese American here is, I think like bên cô Sensen cũng có nhắc nhở là it's just being proud, having pride, and especially like how Thai Pham also mentioned too, it's like, yeah, like we should be proud of the different types of food that we have here, how strong of a community, Vietnamese American community we have here. And so another piece of being Vietnamese American is really encouraging other Vietnamese and Vietnamese American people to, you know, really bound together and be strong in our population, in our strength, and just support each other in any way that we can. So as a community. So.
Hi, I guess I'll introduce myself in Vietnamese too. Xin chào quý vị, tôi là cô Đồng Pauline, tôi là giáo viên dạy tiếng Việt ở trường trung học Westminster. I am Pauline Dome. I'm a Vietnamese language teacher at Westminster High School. I'll respond to this part in English. What does it mean to be Asian American? Honestly, growing up, I was born and raised here as well. I always strongly identified as Vietnamese. Like, but then the Vietnamese American actually, but then the Asian American part came later during college. And I would say being Asian American helps me position myself in US society to see who I am in comparison to other racial groups in this country, because that's how we're classified. And so what it's also done is help me realize that there's a lot of power in community when you get in touch with your roots and get in touch with your identity. Because once you're in touch with your identity, you see the wealth that is available in the community, whether it be community connections, cultural connections, anything, like, and just empowerment in general and finding resources, right? Because people find each other when they have that common identification. And so it's a layered thing, and I still reflect on it.
And I think it's something that takes us a while to accept. I mean, like even though I came from Vietnam lúc 11 tuổi, lúc đó người Việt mình rất ít nên mình vẫn thấy cái kỳ thị đó, mình không muốn dùng tiếng Việt khi mình ở cái môi trường học. Nhưng mà bây giờ mình lớn lại, mình nhìn lại, mình thấy là mình hãnh diện, mình có một cái cuộc đời giống như vậy, mình có gia đình biết tiếng Việt, rồi có con cái biết cái sự phong tục của Việt Nam, mình biết chào hỏi, kính nể những người lớn tuổi hơn.
Dạ, cảm ơn các thầy cô đã giới thiệu bản thân của mình, và em cảm ơn các thầy cô đã cho em biết về suy nghĩ của các thầy cô. Và em nghe là mình có nhắc đến sự tự hào nè, sự tự hào về mình là một người Vietnamese American hoặc là mình là Asian American. Và em cũng nghe về văn hóa cũng như là sự cội nguồn cũng như là nguồn gốc mà mình từ đâu mình ở tới, và em cũng nghe về sự chịu khó và quan trọng nhất là sự mạnh mẽ và cái sự kết nối của mình trong cộng đồng người Việt Nam nói riêng và người châu Á nói chung. So I heard there's pride, there's a mention of pride, culture, hardworking, dedication, strong, and most importantly, the connection within our community. So, what does it mean to stand up against hate? Các thầy cô nghĩ như thế nào về cái sự mình phải đứng dậy và mình phải chống lại những cái sự ganh ghét của xã hội? Em xin mời cô Mai Khánh.
Tough question. What does it mean to stand up to hate? It's to... it's a tough one. Anyway, I can jump in if you guys want to jump in. No, just kidding. Okay, standing up to hate means that you need to be, have courage to be able to defend not just yourself, but the community that you are part of. Like a lot of times, and like how, like when you showed us the video as well too, right? Like those are all hate actions that was shown against all these people that's part of our community, part of our population and stuff. So just being able to defend and be able to stand up against it, like defend, defending that kind of actions. That's what I think.
Nhưng mà như cô thấy, như cô Mai Khanh nói, khi mà mình defend, mình chống lại, một phần trong cái mình chống lại cái sự ghét đó, mình có thể là mình dạy cho họ, mình hướng dẫn là cái phong tục mình từ đâu tới, tại sao mình làm những cái thứ đó. Đó nên cô thấy là những một phần để cho cái phong tục khác hiểu về cái phong tục của mình, là không những là mình tự hào mà mình chống lại những cái sự ghét đó, nhưng mà mình phải nói cho họ biết là tại sao cái ghét đó nó xảy ra.
I think another word, sorry, I know you're about to say something too, but like another word, it's like that ignorance piece where they don't know and they don't understand, and so they just do things because they just don't understand. They don't have the understanding of it.
It makes me think of like how is hate developed, right? It's a learned behavior, or it's just they never learned. It's ignorance, like you just mentioned. And so, standing up to hate means that you need to redirect this behavior because that's not right, right? However they learned or developed it, like we need to right the wrong. And then if they've never learned it, and it's just through ignorance, that's why we need to, have the patience and really teach and really show them and to get them to understand that those feelings or whatever that they're experiencing that then turns into hate, there are other ways to channel it in a more positive way.
Thì cái câu hỏi của em là like how do we stand up to hate? Thì nếu dịch sang tiếng Việt thì cô suy nghĩ cách nào mình đối phó với làn sóng kỳ thị, phải không? Với cái coi như đối với cô á, thì nếu mà mình muốn đối phó với cái làn sóng kỳ thị á, trước tiên là mình phải hỏi câu hỏi cái nền giáo dục ở nước Mỹ nó có dạy cho học sinh, dạy cho cộng đồng để thấu hiểu những cộng đồng khác hay không, để chấp nhận đa văn hóa hay không. Thì đó là câu hỏi đầu tiên. Thứ nhì là cũng phải hỏi là trong hệ thống giáo dục nước Mỹ á, có cho học sinh đa văn hóa cơ hội để học về nguồn gốc của chính học sinh đó hay không. Thì nếu học sinh có cơ hội để học thêm về những coi như dân tộc khác, lịch sử của dân tộc khác, văn hóa của dân tộc khác á, thì có thể là sẽ có cái liên hệ tốt đẹp hơn giữa tất cả mọi người trong cộng đồng. Thì đối với cô trong hệ thống giáo dục ở nước Mỹ hiện nay á, thì giáo trình lịch sử nước Mỹ á, nó không có dạy đầy đủ cho học sinh để có thể tôn trọng lẫn nhau, để có thể biết cách để ủng hộ cộng đồng, và ủng hộ không những là cộng đồng mình mà cũng là cộng đồng khác nữa. Thì đối với cô là cái đầu tiên là mình phải nhìn cái hệ thống giáo dục và phải tiến bộ cái hệ thống giáo dục trước đã. Rồi lúc đó thì qua cái hệ thống giáo dục mình mới có thể đối phó được với cái làn sóng kỳ thị.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, you know, Mike Khan talked about how hate comes from ignorance, right? So it could be because of the fear of the unknown, like, and they don't understand. So you stand up to hate through education, right? Because we are in education. So you want to educate, you know, the students, you know, in the classroom, if we're allowed to have that conversation piece first with our students, so that they can have, you know, a conversation, a dialogue, and so clear up any misconceptions, anything that they might harbor inside for, you know, from different, I guess, different groups, so they can have a, you know, a better understanding per se. And then so when they grow up to become members of society, then they have some sort of understanding for that. So that's what I like to add to that.
So yeah, so we can. I was thinking several thoughts. Number one, like we were talking about defending, man. Sometimes I might want to come up and just like literally defend and fight, but that's not the right way to do it. But going through the education, prevention is one of the big things, and one of the best ways to prevent that hate is to include. And I think at our school, we actually do a pretty good job of including everybody together, especially when we have a lot of different cultures here, and we have cultural events, so that we bring them in, so that it's hard to hate something that you're included in and you enjoy it. And then these are your friends. So I think when you include and you're friends with everybody, and you have a diverse group of friends, it's harder to hate. It's when you do have that ignorance, you are just in your own little silo. It makes it easier to, you know, foment hatred or ignorance, and then become hatred.
So I think hateful behavior and hate speech can take lots of different forms, and can look different depending on where you are and when you are and who you are. And so that requires different strategies for standing up to it. And so I think in the room we've talked about how hate speech can come from ignorance and the fear of the unknown, like you said, which requires a different kind of response than, for example, if the hate speech is willful or it's not ignorant, it's actually very knowing. So for me, standing up to hate speech is kind of knowing different nuances between what hate is, so that we can better be equipped to respond to it. And I think, you know, we need to look at how power is patterned in our communities, because for me, hate is hate if it's done by a person or a group of people who have power. And so it requires then like a kind of like power analysis or an understanding of how power is distributed among people, and then we can kind of like strategize together as communities like how to respond to that hateful behavior.
Thank you for your perspective about these questions. For our next questions, how would you describe hate speech to other educators and students? Các thầy cô sẽ miêu tả hate speech như thế nào với những cái người thầy cô khác trong cái school system của mình, và miêu tả nó như thế nào với học sinh? Và em xin mời thầy.
I think when it comes to, if it's like direct hate speech, that's easy for most people to identify. It's the nuance, the subtle ones, the more like the stereotypes in which we include. That's going to be the harder conversation with our colleagues, because they might not realize that those stereotypes that we use, or there's teasing type of language, is in a way the basis of hate speech for later on. So, you know, I do have colleagues who are not Asian, and when we talk about it, you know, we do tease each other. So part of me is I have to stop making sure that I'm not allowing them to tease me in a way that it seems to everybody around that it's okay, you know. So that's one of the things that I'd like to talk to them about. Like, you know, let's stop using the stereotype type of words or those type of language in which it can be the basis for hate speech later on. Because I don't think any of my educator friends, you know, are seeing like direct hate speech like big, but it's more like the subtle ignorance type of way that hate speech can be fomented in here. So.
Yeah, I agree. We, for the most part, we don't have any educators, thank goodness, that are very like out in the open and hateful towards one another and to the students. But it's those subtle comments, it's the stereotype comments that would come out, and I think it's important to recognize those, and it's also important to speak up and say things like, you know, I don't think that's appropriate, or that's not something that should be stated out loud, and then kind of like explain to them like why it's not appropriate or why you feel uncomfortable. Because I know in the beginning of my career, I kind of just, you know, I don't want to say let it happen, but I definitely didn't want to cause any ripples. Because being a new teacher and everything like that, but then now being a veteran teacher, like I think I just have a little more confidence and feel more secure that I can address a certain individual if they were to make a comment that's not very like, you know, overt hate, but like some subtleties that I can say, like, you know what, like I know you're just kidding around and everything like that, but that's not something that's appropriate, and I would really appreciate it if you know, say it in a different way and not in that way. And so I think it requires us to have those difficult conversations that I don't think too many people want to have difficult conversations, but it's through those difficult conversations that we can really do something about like reducing, if not getting rid of all of those hate speech, or before it spirals and gets even worse.
Yeah, nhưng mà như một phần như Michelle với Thều Hy nói là tại vì mình lớn tuổi hơn nên mình có thể mình nói lại với bạn bè hay những người mình làm chung. Nhưng mà như Heather thấy cho lứa tuổi nhỏ trẻ bây giờ đó, nhất là những cái TikTok hay là Instagram, em của Heather nó cứ gửi cho Heather miết chọc ghẹo về cái phong tục của người khác họ hoặc người Á Đông, giống như là nói, giống như nó chê là tại sao là ăn sầu riêng thúi quá vậy, giống không? Thay vì mình nói họ biết là cái sầu riêng nó không phải là thúi, nhưng mà tại nó có cái mùi đặc biệt hay là gì, nên những cái đó mình phải tìm một cách để mình dạy cái lứa tuổi trẻ hơn mình, để họ không những nó có thể một cách để làm cho nó biết về cái đó, nhưng mà mình nên dạy cho người ta biết là lý do tại sao. Thì mình có thể mình bắt đầu từ đó thì mình có thể mình có ít cái sự tạo ra cái sự ghét.
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned it too, like hate speech, it's not just something that's said in person anymore, it's online now. You know, in comments and when people type it up. And the unfortunate thing is that it's sometimes anonymous. So you don't even know who's saying it, and if they have the education or they have the background, or if they're literally living right next door to you who's saying all of these things as well too. So that's the scary part about hate speech at times.
Yeah. So in preparing for or before this session began, I was like, dang, I actually don't really know how people define hate speech. So I looked it up, and the definition from Cambridge is something like violence or derogatory remarks made toward a person or a group of people. And so, you know, your example about the ring being like stinky makes me think of like the different kinds of violence that people can perpetuate through hate speech. So there's kind of like, there's physical violence like we saw in that video. There's like emotional violence. There's like intellectual violence. You know, it's like all the different ways that we as racialized people in community are told that we like don't have the right to exist or have the right to be a certain kind of way. It's a ways of putting people down in like systemic ways. So I think that's how I would define hate speech to educators. Although I think like, you know, I'm not sure that I would define hate speech differently between educators and students. I think everyone, you know, I think having like a common definition of it between educators and students is important, such that we don't, you know, have a hierarchy between what teachers know about hate speech and what students know about hate speech. Like we all need to have like a common definition from which to work. So yeah.
Nhưng mà mình cũng nên nhớ là khi mình nói về hate speech ấy, không những nó chống lại một cái người như Emma nói, hoặc là một cái nhóm, hoặc là một cái phong tục khác, nhưng mà dù cho những cái người nói, hay là chỉ nói kinh nghiệm của người Việt mình thôi, dù cho người Việt mình cũng chia sẻ cái phần ra, mình nói là người miền Nam, miền Trung, người Bắc Kỳ, cái đó theo Heather thấy cũng là một phần hate speech. Thay vì tại sao mình không nói là người Việt từ miền Bắc mà mình kêu họ là Bắc Kỳ, không?
I think that's like the overarching thing, right? Because then how I view it is that when it's microaggressions that eventually become macroaggressions, like racial or stereotypical macroaggressions, that then is hate speech. So it builds. Like, and if there aren't preventative measures, that oftentimes preventive measures can be provided through education, either community education or systemic education, right? And so if the education is not provided to help people be more open-minded and willing to listen, then that's what happens. And it's the lack of education. And I'm not just talking about systemic education again. I'm talking about education in the community, cultural education, education as a human being. If there's not enough of that, then hate speech happens.
For our next questions, các thầy cô nghĩ như thế nào khi mà những cái người xung quanh mình trong cộng đồng đó, họ có những cái lời nhận xét hơi kỳ thị đối với mình, hoặc là những cái lời nhận xét nó không có được hay ho cho lắm á, thì người ta có những lời nhận xét như vậy về cái cộng đồng người Việt mình nói riêng và cộng đồng người châu Á mình nói chung, thì các thầy cô có cái suy nghĩ như thế nào về cái chuyện này? So, why do you think people make like some racist remarks around our community? Not just our Vietnamese American community, but Asian American community in general. Like, why do you think people have to make those remarks on us? I'm gonna start to invite Miss.
Why do people make racist remarks is the question? It's just ignorance. I feel. I think just thinking based off of just my experience, the usual individuals who would make racist remarks around my presence for the most part is just they lack the life experience and the, I guess, the ability to connect with others. And so it's easier to make these comments just to make themselves look not better, but just to hide some, like, I guess, insecurities or whatnot. Yeah, that's all the thought I have at the moment on that.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, như là cô Michelle nói, một phần là tại vì khi mà họ có một cái lời nói kỳ thị về một cái người hoặc một nhóm người là tại vì họ không có hiểu biết về cái phong tục đó, nên nó tạo ra cái sự không hiểu biết, mà không những họ không hiểu biết mà họ không muốn hiểu biết. Tại vì nếu mà bây giờ tất cả cái gì mình cũng có thể tìm được trên internet hết, nếu mà họ muốn hiểu biết về một cái phong tục gì, hoặc muốn có một cái thắc mắc gì về một cái nhóm người nào đó, thì họ có thể tìm hiểu, đọc ra dễ dàng.
I think going back to the question too, where like they kind of mentioned too, yeah, like the reason, I think for me how I see it is that like how Go Michelle did mention is like they want to feel, or maybe you mentioned it earlier too, like they want to feel higher than you, so like they put you down. and especially us as a minority too, like they put us down so that they can also feel higher and above and feel like, you know, you're not as the same level as me, you know. So I think that's why, and for us, unfortunately, like, again, we're a minority in the group. Kind of hard to say because in Little Saigon, you know, we're not really a minority, right? We have a lot of Vietnamese people here, a lot of Asian American people here. But when you go out, and like how others mentioned already too, yeah, like we are the minority and people do put us down because they think that we're the minority, we're not the majority, and it's easier to put us down because we're not going to say anything against it, or that we are, like, I'm going to say this word, like the moral minority myth, where it's like we don't do anything about it because we shouldn't, you know, we're the minority. We don't have the power as much as them.
So to kind of add to what, you know, what's been said already, like, yeah, they say racist remarks due to ignorance, but on top of that, they want to perk themselves up. And I think it's because they probably feel like it's a threat. Like maybe we pose a threat. So they have that need to put, you know, the minority groups down so they can feel higher, as Maikan mentioned. That's how I see it.
It's like their insecurities, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I was going to say insecurity, fear. Yeah. Sometimes, I'll be honest, they just fear something and they got to blame somebody. And because in the bigger picture, we are the minority, so it's easier to blame somebody. And a lot of people think just Asians are more, you know, laid back. Or not laid back's not the right term. The model minority. We're not going to. Yeah, we're not going to say anything. So they just, it's their fear. To be honest, a lot of people, it is fear, because, you know, I'm going to say a lot of people, they're just, if there was no fear, they might not do anything at all. Right. But because they fear something, they might as well blame. Because then, you know, COVID-19. They feared it and they blamed it on Chinese, and then we're grouped in too. And we're not going to push back, which is why in the video they just attack all the old people. They're not going to say anything back because they can't.
Right, just, you know, for Asians, we're considered easy targets because we don't usually speak up when, you know, there's conflict issues. We tend to just keep quiet. So it tends to be easy targets. They pick on us.
Thì cô cũng đồng ý với tất cả thầy cô có mặt ngày hôm nay á, là khi người ta coi như trong xã hội của mình kỳ thị đối với người Á Châu, thì họ cũng muốn tìm một cái cảm giác quyền lực đó, và cũng có cái sợ hãi. Thì cô cũng nhớ là cô cũng học lịch sử, là coi như mỗi nhóm thiểu số mà đến nước Mỹ á, thì cái nhóm coi như đa số, phải không, là thường là người da trắng. Họ sợ là người thiểu số, ví dụ trong trường hợp này người Á Châu, sẽ lấy đi quyền lợi của họ in one way or another. Thì đối với cô á, nói chung á, thì cũng có thể nói là tại vì họ mặc cảm, họ sợ là họ sẽ bị rơi vào trường hợp yếu thế trong xã hội. Nhưng đối với cô, it all comes down to quyền lực. Mỗi nhóm á, muốn quyền lực. Và khi con người mà kỳ thị đối với người khác là tại vì trong lúc đó họ cảm giác là yếu for one reason or another, và họ dùng cái cơ hội đó, cơ hội nhỏ hoặc cơ hội lớn đó để có thể coi như đàn áp người khác, và cái đó là con người, and it's unfortunate.
I echo everything that's been said here. I think thinking about like what it is that people feel insecure about, that they feel like they have to make derogatory remarks, is interesting, because it can give us kind of clues about how unstable the structure of our society is. And so if some certain groups of people make hateful remarks, that says something about how they feel that their position in society is precarious, that it can change. And so it's a way of kind of like reminding everyone about what their place is. And so, you know, when people like make derogatory comments about a group of people, about like Vietnamese Americans, for example, it's in a way to say, remember your place in society. Remember that you are like not good enough to be, you know, like fully American. And I think it's also important to hold ourselves accountable for the derogatory remarks that we make toward other people too, because everyone is positioned in society somehow, and people are always in relation to each other. And so where are Vietnamese American people in relation to other groups is, I think, an important question, because if we think about the kinds of hateful remarks or racist kinds of feelings we have about other groups of people, it also tells something about where we feel like we are in society. And I'm drawing on my own kind of like family experiences of hearing racist language and, you know, trying to reckon with that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. So em có nghe cái vấn đề đây, có nghĩa là giống như là cái cộng đồng của mình á, thì những cái việc mà nó xảy ra liên quan đến cái chuyện kỳ thị đó thì nó đến từ nguồn gốc là sự mặc cảm, cũng như là sự không có quan tâm đến cái cảm xúc của người khác trong cái cộng đồng mình như thế nào, và cũng như là cái sự không có cố gắng thấu hiểu cho người trong cộng đồng của mình. Thì cái câu hỏi tiếp theo là các thầy cô nghĩ như thế nào về cái sự phá hoại hoặc cái sự tàn phá của cái hate speech đối với cái cộng đồng trường học của mình. How might hate speech damage the school community? I would love to start off with cô Mai Khanh.
I think for me, thankfully at our school, we have such a big population of Vietnamese American students and such a culturally diverse school that luckily it doesn't happen to us as often as we think. Hopefully, I think that's the question that we're being asked, right? Like how, okay. But other than that, like, yes, it still happens around. It still happens because, again, like how we mentioned, like it's stereotypical little subtle things that happen. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody else can pick it up, please.
I just feel like, I mean, obviously we wouldn't have a community, right? I feel like we have a really good community in the school in the past few years where there's been a lot of effort, a lot of intentions made in terms of from, you know, our staff to make sure that we welcome all and differences are accepted and should be celebrated, because we have so many different celebrations, cultural celebrations, so many different clubs and everything here that students have the power to, you know, start and everything. And so because of us being so open and welcoming to everybody's differences, we have a school community. And if we don't continue to, I guess, model that with each other, like adults, and with our students, then we really wouldn't have a community, because a community is everybody working together, supporting one another, celebrating, you know, one another and everything. And if we don't put effort into that, we wouldn't have a community.
I would like to expand this to not just the high school community at Westminster High School or any other high school in our area, but I would also like to ask about the college level. So Emma, do you have any thoughts about how might hate speech damage the college community, especially where you are having your PhD study right now, UCLA? How do you think this affected?
Yeah, that's such a thoughtful question. I think that, like, I love hearing that here at Westminster High that you foster a sense of community such that hate speech is dampened or doesn't happen. I think that's important because hate speech, in all of its different ways that it takes form, can really corrode trust from students, from teachers, from school leaders, from administrators. And that corrosion of trust makes it really hard to foster a sense of community and a sense of accountability to each other. And I've been fortunate to have experienced community at the different campuses that I've been at, but I've also experienced what it feels like to feel abandoned by the college or the university when there's no statement made about some hateful behavior that has happened. And that has made me less, excited to represent the school. It's made me less excited to come to class or to make friendships, or because it doesn't feel like it's a space that is supportive. And I think that especially for vulnerable communities and people of color, that sense of community is so important. And school is such an important place where young people feel community. And if there's no trust there, then that's just a huge missed opportunity.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Pham, do you have anything to add about the school community?
talking about our school, we're lucky, but to have this community because we have lesson, it's been dampened. But I've actually worked with students from other schools in which they are the minority, and when they don't have that direct hate speech, but the stereotype, they feel uncomfortable. So those students I actually worked with, they tell me that they feel uncomfortable. They don't feel part of the school, and they always say, I want to transfer to some other school because it made them like isolated, and the learning gets harder because they feel like the other students are making fun of them, but the teachers don't do anything, so they're not like they're backing them up. So they feel it's really uncomfortable. So in that case, I try to tell them, I can't transfer you to another school, but we do talk about it and say, hey, you do have a few others. Try to make a community with them and hold strong as best you can. So, but it does, dampen that whole trust in the whole school system.
Yeah. Cô Sen, cô có chia sẻ là cô có cái cơ hội được part of rất là nhiều cộng đồng khác nhau đó, thì cô có cái suy nghĩ như thế nào về cái vấn đề này thưa cô?
Cô thấy như tất cả thầy cô đã nói đây, cái chữ mà quan trọng mình nên nhớ là cái community, cái cộng đồng. Dù cho cái cộng đồng có thể là chỉ một người duy nhất thôi, hoặc là 5 người, hoặc là 500 người. Nếu mà mình có cái cơ hội để mình tạo cái cộng đồng đó, dù cho giống như là, thí dụ như cô là chỉ một người Việt duy nhất ở trung học này thôi, nhưng mà cô tạo cái cộng đồng bằng cách là hướng dẫn những cái phong tục khác để họ hiểu biết về cái gốc của cô, thì họ có thể tạo được một cái cộng đồng. Nên mình quan trọng nhất là mình nên nhớ cái cộng đồng mình tạo, nó sẽ giúp cho người ta hiểu biết về cái phong tục của dù cho mình người Việt, người Á Đông hay người Mễ hay người Tây Ban Nha, bất cứ cái đó mình có cái cộng đồng đó, mình giúp đỡ với nhau để mình hướng dẫn những cái phong tục hoặc những cái nhóm của người gốc tộc khác.
Cảm ơn các thầy cô. Và qua cái câu hỏi này thì cái từ mà động lại trong cái cuộc nói chuyện của mình đó là cái từ cộng đồng, community. Thì vào cái câu hỏi tiếp theo đó, là các thầy cô nghĩ như thế nào về cái sự quan trọng khi mà mình phải nói về hate speech đối với những cái người trong cộng đồng của mình, và mình phải thông báo cho người ta biết như thế nào để người ta có những cái cách để loại trừ, cũng như là có những cái cách để đối phó với những cái hate speech đang diễn ra ở trong cái cộng đồng của mình. Why do you think it's important to talk about hate speech, and why might it be important to have guidelines for preventing or dealing with hate speech? And I would like to start off with Emma.
I think talking about hate speech is so important because it's such a kind of big dimension of one kind of way that racism manifests, racism and classism, and other kinds of isms against groups of people. And the more we understand the different ways that this violence happens, the better we can kind of see how communities can join forces to fight that common enemy. Because hate speech sometimes will be the same kinds of words or ideas will be used against both Vietnamese people and Filipinx people, or Vietnamese people and Black people, and it's important to see what those similarities and those differences are, so that we can forge ahead a greater sense of community and solidarity. And I think having guidelines for hate speech can be tricky because, again, hate speech looks different everywhere you are and everywhere you go. So in a place like Orange County, hate speech will look different than it does in New Orleans or in Boston, where there are other Vietnamese people, for example. And so it makes it hard to kind of have guidelines or to have best practices for something like that because it's all forged in context. But I think there are ways that communities can come together in a local place and develop, what is important to them. What is important, for Westminster High School to address, and how to address it will be different than how, I don't know, a school in LAUSD might do it. And so I think, I think having those guidelines for those individual communities is important because it gives the people in that community a chance to voice what it is that they're concerned about in terms of hate speech and bigotry, and to problem solve together. And that includes the voices of students too.
Cô Sen có cái cảm nghĩ như thế nào thưa cô?
Thì cô cũng như đồng ý như cô Emma nói đó, là mình khi mà mình muốn tạo một cái luật lệ hay là cái gì mà để làm sao mình chống lại hate speech thì nó phải tùy theo cái cộng đồng mà mình sống chung quanh mình phải bắt đầu từ đó. Như cô Emma nói, mình bắt đầu từ trường học rồi tới cái cộng đồng của mình. Rồi nhiều khi cô cũng đồng ý như cô Emma nói là mỗi cộng đồng nó có một cái sự ghét của nhóm nó khác nhau tùy theo cái nguồn sống chung quanh của mình nó như thế nào.
I feel like hate or hate speech is like it's complex, right? Like when you say you hate something, it's not something you wake up one day and you're automatically you hate it. It's like an evolution of events, things building up over time and everything like that just kind of like erupt into this big, very complex emotion, right? And so I feel like we need to start on a more simple level in terms of really understanding human emotions, like the basic ones in terms of what you're feeling, why you're feeling that, because the idea of hate speech is like the result of things that happen to you based off of someone else's behavior, right? And a lot of times we don't take the time to really think about what was going on with that individual for them to treat you the way they do. A lot of times we just think, that individual identified as blah, 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 or they look like this, or their identity is that, like, you know, came at me like this and treated me like this. And so now, you know, I'm going to estimate that that's what all of those type of people do, right? But really, it's just a lot of random events that we really don't take the time to really understand why people behave they do until we sit down and think about what situation were they in to have them behave that way. And so that's something that I try to like really help my students, because I'm too trying to focus on, like, you know, when someone treats me in a certain way, or, you know, based off of our interaction and the emotion that they're going through, I focus on what emotion they're going through at the moment, understand their emotion, where they came from and whatnot that made them feel that way, and then try to understand and put myself in their shoes and feel those emotions. And it's through really that understanding that allow for me to have conversation and ask questions to really help them process through those emotions, so that it doesn't escalate to a point where it turns into something as big as hate speech or just hate in general.
For me, it's you know, it's simple. You know, we want to have a conversation about hate speech because we, you know, want to address it, right? You want to address it because if you don't speak up, then nothing's gonna be done to dampen it or to put a stop to it. And having guidelines is essential to have a constructive discussion about it, because if you don't have guidelines, then it could turn to another hate speech against another group, right? You don't want to return, you know, like, what do you call it, like have another hate speech against the hate speech, right? Yeah, reciprocate violence with violence, right? So constructive discussion to problem solve the problem.
Well, I'm just going to go with a simple quote. I mean, you got to bring light to the darkness, right? A lot of it comes to me is through ignorance and through seeing others. If you bring it out and you discuss it out in the open, at least it can be addressed. And then going with what Taylor said, you know, you have these guidelines so it doesn't turn into something else and you start attacking another group, but you address the actual problem, which is to bring that it exists into light. Because sometimes, and then when we discuss it, sometimes we look at ourselves. We're talking about hate speech, but like, hey, maybe I also have some of that in my own life, and maybe I need to fix that up too. Clean myself up so I can clean up my community too.
Yep. And I think, again, like how Tai Hui mentioned it too, like making it known so that other students and other people around you know that, yeah, it exists, you know, and then going back to having the guidelines, having that little bit of like that controlled environment so that we can have a good conversation, have a safe conversation to talk about it, then that's the importance of it, of making sure everybody has that space to do it. Go down.
In terms of like your question was why might be important to have guidelines, right?
That's the second part.
That's the second part. I don't remember the first part. Why is it important to address? I think it's just part of like the effort to be a human being who practices conscientiousness, right? I'm not saying moral, conscientiousness, right? Being aware. I think self-reflection is needed when it comes to just functioning in society, not just the classroom. Everyone needs it, not just students, teachers, adults of all races, as well, of all groups. We don't practice self-reflection enough, in my opinion, as a society, because our society, at least California, right, it's just go, go, go. Like everything's go, go, go. And how much time do people actually have to think about how their words might impact others, especially if that's not provided, like in the spaces they're currently in. So it's important because it's preventative. It's preventative and it's part of growth, right? And it's part of making sure that others don't feel oppressed, disrespected, or unheard. And it also mitigates any potential for violence in the long run.
Yeah, em cảm ơn các thầy cô. Thì hồi nãy đến giờ là mình nói về cái sự quan trọng của mình phải có những cái quyết định về cái guidelines cho cái cộng đồng của mình. Thì em muốn hỏi các thầy cô rằng là bây giờ thì đa số những thầy cô ở đây đều ở trong khu vực Little Saigon or Orange County. So các thầy cô có những cái suy nghĩ như thế nào về việc tạo ra những cái guidelines ở khu mình ở khu vực mình ở đây, Little Saigon. Và tại vì mình ở đây thì mình chỉ biết cái cộng đồng ở đây thôi, thì mình không có nói về những cái cộng đồng ở những cái bang khác được, thì mình chú tâm đến cộng đồng của mình. Thì what might those guidelines be here in Little Saigon? And because since it's tough for us to talk about other places because we don't live there, so what are your thoughts about those guidelines be here specifically in Little Saigon? I'm gonna start off with cô Đông.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think your question's interesting in the sense where you say, what could the guidelines be? That's going to look different within every space in the community. I think the first step would be making space so that people can have dialogue and know how to have dialogue. Because there's a difference between dialogue and discussion. Discussion is just throwing ideas out there. Dialogue is listening, active listening, and exchanging of ideas, which is actually a higher level skill that not everyone has been exposed to in the community. So the first step would be making spaces and opportunities available for people of all ages to have a safe spaces to actually talk about these issues. Because I don't think I can even think of any spaces where the actual dialogue about these guidelines are happening besides what we're doing right now and we're discussing right now.
I think what I mentioned about the dialogue and having space for it, it's also time too, right? Like having it more frequent, more often, as well as just trying to think about like when is it necessary to have it too? So that space and then that time, right, to have it happen.
My practical brain is like thinking like, how do we put this into action? How do we like get it going? Just throwing this out there. I just feel like psychology is such an important subject for everyone to learn. Like I tell my students, like once you understand why people are the way they are, all the negative feelings that you have just goes away because you're like, oh, I get it, you know? And like I think teaching AP psychology, the word AP just scares kids away, you know? And so I think it's so important, and I really hope, like in the near future, that it becomes a graduation requirement where every student in high school takes a psychology class and really understand human behavior and like why we do the things we do, is just so that we can get along, because now we understand and we can have these conversations and stuff because we now have a better understanding and everything like that. So that's just me pitching it out there.
Như cô Michelle nói, psychology, cái sự hiểu biết về cái tâm lý của cái người, cái đó là mình phải suốt nguyên đời mình phải tìm hiểu cái đó. Nhưng mà mình có thể bắt đầu bằng cách trong cái ngành giáo dục của mình. Lứa tuổi cấp 1, cấp 2 thì có thể hơi khó, nhưng mà cấp 3 thì mình có thể bắt đầu mình hướng dẫn được cho học sinh hiểu biết cái không những cái tâm lý của người học sinh nhưng mà tâm lý của cái cộng đồng của học sinh sinh sống ra sao.
Well, just sticking to guidelines, I think just the basis to a constructive dialogue is respect, right? We should have respect and keeping an open mind, you know, in the discussion or dialogue. I think that's essential.
Question, Mr. Nguyen, in terms of respect, like how does that work? Like what, not just you, but just all of you guys, in terms of what are your thoughts on respect? Like, is it something that you feel it's automatically that is given or taken, or like how does respect work for you guys? Because it's obviously it's important, right? But really, if we were to dig into it, like how would it work for you, or I guess how would you like for it to work for you? I don't know.
Like, I think for me, when it comes to, because now that we're kind of talking about like the dialogue and having respect, it's like just kind of formatting the way how you respond to other people's ideas, or when they bring up something about themselves, you're not putting them down like, oh no, but like using those kind of negative words, but changing it up to be a little bit more like, oh, I understand, and yes, I feel that way, and you know, like just trying to change up some of your wordings for it too, just so that it doesn't sound like you're just putting other people down, right? But it's like you're trying to keep your, like how Thanh Nguyen said, like just keeping an open mind, trying to understand, be understanding and considerate, and also that piece of like empathy, right? Feeling and understanding what they're actually going through. So that's how I see respect. So just changing the words, how you say things and respond to things.
Is there a limit to it? Is it limitless?
I don't know. We haven't tried it yet. Let's try it.
So maybe that's why it's important to have a moderator.
To respect.
Right?
Yes.
Like, moderator. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, is there a limit to respect where, you know, if your mentality is, no matter what, I'm always going to be respectful to whoever, right? And then is there a limit to when you stop giving this person respect, regardless of how many times they wronged you or mistreat you?
That's a really good question. It depends. Layers, there is a limit, in my opinion. Usually how I approach it is, I will respect people by respecting the fact that they're a human being, that they're growing, that they have flaws, and they have, you know, triumphs, tribulations, and common decency, right, when I first meet them. But if they show me multiple times that they don't want to change, or they continue to either belittle my culture or belittle my history, my community, I pivot. It means I don't talk. They don't have access to me anymore. That's where the limit of respect is.
I think we also mentioned about a moderator.
Well, yeah, like it's, you know, like if you're going to have, you know, a space for people to, you know, for the community to come together and have a dialogue about hate speech and, you know, and how to potentially put a stop to it, coming up with strategies, then I think it's necessary to have a moderator, because not everyone is going to be respectful, because they might harbor certain, you know, deep hatred inside. You just don't know, right? So a moderator or a facilitator that can help, I guess, step in to, I guess, put a stop to it before it escalates, right? Things escalate.
Yeah, it seems like in addition to respect, an important part of the dialogue is empathy, and which is different from respect.
Right.
Because empathy helps you to kind of understand where somebody is coming from and why. To empathize for someone or with someone who's making hate speech seems counterintuitive and hard, but I think it could be it could give you clues as to how you can respond to that person, to kind of shake their sense of power or their sense of superiority. In that, I think, like, a lot of times we don't think about the histories through which we develop our opinions and our philosophies toward groups of people. And so if, you know, we better understand the histories of how those come to be, then we can better understand where people are coming from. Again, because hate speech doesn't just occur out in the open, but also within our own communities. And so one place to start is like thinking about, you know, if I hear hateful speech in my family or in my community, I can like empathize with them, right? Like I can kind of see like where they're coming from and why they might have fear or anxiety about this. And that's like, I think maybe a good place to start.
Em cảm ơn các thầy cô đã cho biết cái suy nghĩ của các thầy cô về cái vấn đề hate speech này. Thì để chuẩn bị kết thúc cho cái buổi interview ngày hôm nay, em xin kính mời các thầy cô coi một đoạn video ngắn để mình có thể wrap up những cái discussion mình đã có. Thì I would like to invite you guys to watch another short video to wrap up today's interview.
Into admin because I feel like that's my purpose, to have that one-on-one relationship with my students where I feel like I have a bigger impact in changing their trajectory than I do.
Trong cái ngành giáo dục mình bắt đầu với lại cái học sinh của mình, rồi từ đó mình mong muốn là học sinh mình hiểu biết những cái gì mình đã giảng dạy cho học sinh, rồi mình tiếp truyền những cái đó cho ra cộng đồng, và về sau này khi những học sinh đó lớn lên thành tuổi rồi sẽ tiếp tục những cái gì mình đã hướng dẫn những học sinh đó.
Exactly.
Thầy Nguyễn có muốn add gì không ạ?
Yeah, like you know, I agree to what Maikon and whoever else said regarding celebration. Right? It's you know, as a school community here, you know, like say for as educators, as club advisors, it would be helpful if you can, you know, bring your students, your clubs, to various school events that celebrate cultures. Like for instance, this month is Hispanic Heritage Month, right? And we, Mr. Pham and I attended their celebration. Was it last Friday? Yeah, and you know, it's a great cultural celebration, and it's you know, we saw, you know, not just Hispanic, you know, not just the Hispanic community attending, but we also saw like some Asian, you know, Vietnamese people in particular attending and celebrating. And you know, whatever that you don't understand, it's a perfect, I guess, setting to have a dialogue, right? And asking questions like, okay, why are they doing this? And gain an understanding, maybe a deeper understanding of their culture, right? That's Hispanic, and the same goes for our culture when we have, like, say, that celebration in, when is it, next year, February or January? February, yeah. And do reciprocate, inviting other cultures to come and celebrate with us, and through that celebration we can educate them about why we celebrate, you know, the holidays that we do, and more, right?
Yeah. Em cảm ơn các thầy cô. So để mình có thể chuẩn bị kết thúc cho cái buổi trò chuyện của ngày hôm nay, thì các thầy cô có những cái suy nghĩ cuối cùng nào mà mình muốn nói về cái chủ đề này không ạ? Do you have any last thoughts about our discussion today before we wrapping up?
I have something. So I don't know who said this, but this is always something that I always remind myself too, is if you can be anything in the world, be kind. Like, that's it, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't need to say it, right? It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help yourself. So again, and that's the thing that I remind my students. I even have a little frame in my class too, where it's like, just be kind. Be a kind, good human being. That's it. That's it.
That's a great way to end it.
Yeah, it's a great way to end it, and I am glad that I've been given this opportunity to have this conversation, to see this and these different points of view, and it's kind of make me reflect on myself a little bit, on how I treat other and how I view hate speeches, or, you know. So I think it's a good thing. Like I think thầy Lauren said, it's, you know, creating an opportunity to communicate with each other, to understand each other. So be kind and be understanding. That's where we need to end it.
Keep adding on.
Yeah, no. Be kind and be understanding.
Positivity is a necessity. So
Một lần nữa em xin cảm ơn các thầy cô và đã dành thời gian để đến ngày hôm nay và tham gia vào cái cuộc discussion cũng như là interview của đài LittleSaigon. Again, I want to say thank you for your time and to come here to participate in this interview for LittleSaigon TV, and I hope the best for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rõ ràng là mặc dù mỗi người có thể có quan điểm khác nhau, suy nghĩ, hành động khác nhau, nhưng sau cuộc trò chuyện này, các thầy cô giáo đều nhìn thấy rằng cộng đồng từng bước một cần có một mục tiêu chung để chống lại sự thù ghét. Stop the hate.